thing from me ever. Learn these two words, diamine oxidase. Diamine oxidase is an enzyme. Sometimes people may be deficient in diamine oxidase. And one of the issues happens to be with histamine. So if you have a lot of histamine in your body, diamine oxidase can help you reduce your histamine levels. And if you're an endurance athlete in particular, you can have high diamine oxidase levels. And so diamine oxidase is activated through several different ways, and it's activated through diet and hormones. Like, so eating certain things and certain hormonal patterns or certain hormonal contexts, you'll have diamine oxidase created. There are, so my search yielded a lot of results, and my search yielded some good sources. So I went down this rabbit hole about copper. And so it turns out that, I eat beef liver, and I typically don't have to eat that much to get satiated from it. And I'm finding out now that it's probably due to the fact that it has a high copper content, and copper is an essential nutrient in the synthesis of diamine oxidase. So copper activates diamine oxidase. So I'm gonna read this directly. DAO, from here on out, I'm gonna refer to diamine oxidase as DAO. DAO contains a copper as a cofactor, and copper deficiency may impair DAO activity. Consuming foods that are rich in copper, such as shellfish, liver, and nuts, can help support DAO activity, which is really interesting. So beef liver, it's high in copper. So I wanted to know what are some sources of copper containing foods. Here are the top 5 copper containing foods based on data from the United States Department of Agriculture, right? Beef liver, one slice of 80 or 81 grams of cooked beef liver contains 4.1 milligrams of copper, which is 455% of the daily value for copper, right? Oysters contain about 2.3 milligrams. Dark chocolate, which I eat often, contains 0.9 milligrams. Cashews, 1 ounce of cashews, 28 grams. Same thing with dark chocolate, 28 grams. 28 grams of cashews is 0.6 milligrams copper, and sunflower seeds, 28 grams. Sunflower seeds contain 0.5 milligrams copper, which is 56% of the DV for copper, right? And here are the sources. I'll cite the sources. So I wanted to find out, well, what may cause a copper deficiency? So, of course, right, so most of these sources of copper that I just talked about, all of them are nutritional sources. So if you have an inadequate dietary intake, definitely you're going to be low in copper. Malabsorption may be an issue, right? And then there may be genetic disorders, like some genetic disorders are caused by some genetic disorders are caused by copper deficiencies. Or some genetic disorders, copper deficiency can be caused by genetic disorders that affect the copper metabolism. And so I was thinking, so maybe when I found this out about diamine oxidase, right, I found out what it is, how it's synthesized, and what are some of the factors that can make someone deficient in copper, which is an essential component of DAO synthesis. I started wondering, so how might someone that is an endurance athlete be affected by this? Because I'm an endurance athlete, and I stumbled upon DAO, and I've had troubles with histamine. I had troubles with high histamine levels. I had troubles with acid reflux, and my dad had the same problem, and my dad was relatively thin. My dad was also in the Army, in the military, right? So just as I know, my dad fought in World War II. That's how old he was, right? So my dad was in his mid-40s when I was born. So, and I had the same problem. And not too long ago, I found out that there's a second generation histamine that's generated in the gut, and it's not like the typical histamine we get. It's the second generation, and that's why certain newer drugs for histamine are better than the old school stuff like Pepto-Bismol and Rolaids, for example, and the Tums. So anyway, as we go on, I deduced that cardiovascular exercise or endurance exercise can probably stimulate high histamine levels in humans. And so I did some researching around. This is what I found. I wanted to know how my cardiovascular exercise increase histamine levels in the human body. And there's a study in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology from 1995 that found that the narrowing of the airways during exercise was associated with increased histamine release in the lungs. So exercise-induced bronchoconstriction is a condition characterized by narrowing of the airways during exercise, which a study published in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology found that exercise-induced bronchoconstriction, a condition characterized by narrowing of the airways during exercise, was associated with increased histamine release in lungs. The study concluded that histamine may play a role in the development of exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. Well, that's kind of something that's adjacent to this, but there's another study published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology found that a single bout of intense exercise increased plasma histamine levels in healthy individuals. The study suggested that exercise-induced histamine release may be mediated by sympathetic nervous system activation. This study's from 2000, right? And from 2017, a review article published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine concluded that exercise-induced histamine release may contribute to the development of symptoms such as itching, flushing, and hives in individuals with histamine intolerance. The article suggested that reducing histamine levels through dietary modifications and supplementations may help to alleviate these symptoms. So here's my belief, right? So histamine typically it happens with things that are foreign to your body, right? And so what happens during exercise, especially cardiovascular exercise, there's a lot of oxygen throughput and a lot of oxidation going on, which is can be a form of inflammation, right? With that going on, you have more inflammatory markers in your body, and your body is going to release a lot of histamine in the bloodstream when a lot of this happens. When you're breaking down tissue uniformly across your body, you're going to break down a lot of tissue, causing there to be a lot of histamine. So similarly, we have an ice cube and water, and you have the temperature over time, and you get that same volume of ice cube, and you crush it up. There's more surface area to cool the water down, right? And so basically, when you're doing cardiovascular exercise, it's the whole body that's doing the exercise, and you're getting your system bombarded with these particles that are causing the histamine response. Versus if you're doing resistance training, you're typically focusing on one muscle group or a couple of muscle groups, and you're generating something similar, but there's not as much oxygen going on, not as much oxidation, and the muscle fiber is different when it's growing. The muscle fiber is growing back less dense and bigger in size. Anyway, as we go on, I wanted to describe the mechanism by which cardiovascular exercise might have an effect on histamine levels in humans and cite relevant sources in MLA format. And those same studies by Brandon, Kovacs, and Jansen came up, and I found pretty much the same stuff, but nothing too interesting other than I wanted to see a little bit more about the studies about how DAO is activated in copper, vitamin B6, and hormones. And I got to the point where it showed that estrogen and progesterone can stimulate DAO activity. So if you're an endurance athlete and you're a female, you may not have the same issue as a male has with acid reflux, right? However, I would imagine that if you're a female and you have lower estrogen or lower progesterone, or if your estrogen and progesterone are not within a normal ranges, I would imagine, that's a better way to say it, that you may have problems with digestion. Just because if you're an endurance athlete, in my theory, this is all theory, by the way, my theory is that as an endurance athlete, a lot more oxidation is going on, and a greater likelihood of there being a histamine response that's full body as opposed to being body part when you're doing resistance training. So I wanted to see if high histamine levels can affect the immune response in humans, and we all know that allergic reactions and inflammation and also immune suppression is our outcomes. And here are some studies that talk about how allergic reactions and how histamine is a key mediator of allergic reactions. And then here's a study that talks about histamines also involved in the inflammatory response. Inflammatory response, which is the body's natural defense mechanism against infection and injury. And this one talks about immune suppression. And conversely, high histamine levels can also suppress the immune response in certain situations. This is all very complicated and very all involved, and not many doctors have found significant answers. And I think I have something to add. I think one of the perspectives is how your muscles repair themselves. And part of the process of exercising itself, it causes some cells to die and get regenerated. And the fact that because there's so much at one time, your body probably cannot produce enough DAOs to keep the histamine levels at a reasonable rate. So I don't know if this to be a fact, but I do know when I eat beef liver, I've always felt good. I've always been satiated way far sooner on beef liver, which is probably 1/4 the amount of steak I would eat, and I would feel amazing. It's probably why organ meats are the best. Anyway, I'm Schmidtie. I hope you learned something today, and if you never learn anything else, learn about diamine oxidase, or DAO. I hope you reach your fitness goals.